Hey everybody, I'm Addie Langham with Uvalde Classical Academy. This video is for our 6th grade literature class. So hi guys, I'm so glad that you could join me today. Alright, pull out your Esperanza Rising books. We're going to start on page 39, which is Los Higos, and that means the figs. All right, so be on the lookout for some examples of personification. We're going to do a little bit of discussing as we go. So if you have your questions out that were available on Google Docs and through Google Classroom, go ahead and pull those out as we read, and you might be able to get some answers as we go. All right, here we go. The wind blew hard that night, and the house moaned and whistled. Instead of dreaming of birthday songs, Esperanza's sleep was filled with nightmares. An enormous bear was chasing her, getting closer and closer, and finally folding her in a tight embrace. Its fur caught in her mouth, making it hard to breathe. Someone tried to pull the bear away, but couldn't. The bear squeezed harder until it was smothering Esperanza. Then, when she thought that she would suffocate, the bear grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her until her head wagged back and forth. Then her eyes opened and then closed again. She realized she was dreaming, and for an instant, she felt relieved, but the shaking began again, harder this time. All right, so did anyone see an example of personification within that very first page that we just read? If you look at the very first sentence, it's actually going to give the house some characteristics. So the sentence says, "The wind blew hard that night, and the house moaned and whistled." Now, we know that houses do not have the ability to make noise in and of themselves. Like, they can't whistle, they can't moan. But the creaks that happen in a house give us that idea that it is actually alive. So remember, the idea is that the land is alive, the house is alive, and there's lots of different things. So the question of number 1 on this particular question sheet actually asks you to give an example of personification. This is not the only example of personification that we are going to encounter during this chapter, so don't feel pressured to use this one, but I just wanted to remind you that personification is giving inanimate objects or not living objects the ability to live through your wording. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Also, if you talk about the idea of the bear, you might consider who or what the bear symbolizes. Why would Esperanza have this dream? Could the bear be the death of her father? Could the bear be her uncles? Could the bear be her fear? Maybe just keep in mind what the symbolism of that dream might be. All right, let's keep going. Someone was calling her. "Esperanza!" She opened her eyes. "Esperanza, wake up!" screamed Mama. "The house is on fire!" Smoke drifted into the room. "Mama, what's happening?" "Get up, Esperanza. We must get Abuelita." Esperanza heard Alfonso's deep voice yelling from somewhere downstairs. Senora Ortega! Esperanza!" "Here! We're here!" called Mama, grabbing a damp rag from the washbowl and handing it to Esperanza to put over her mouth and nose. Esperanza swung around in a circle, looking for something, anything to save. She grabbed the doll. Then she and Mama hurried down the hallway towards Abuelita's room, but it was empty. I mean, think about it. She's been woken up out of her sleep and been told that there's a fire, and she's looking around looking for something to save, and she chooses the doll that her dad gave her. Why do you think she chose that doll? And if you had been in a similar situation, and maybe you have been in a fire or something like that, which I hope that that's not true, but if you were in that situation, what would you save, and why would you save it? It's something to think about. All right. "Here, we're here," called Mama, grabbing a damp rag from the washbowl and handing it to Esperanza to put over her mouth and nose. Esperanza swung around in a circle, looking for something, anything to save. She grabbed the doll, and then she and Mama hurried down the hall towards Abuelita's room, but it was empty. "Alfonso!" screamed Mama. "Abuelita is not here!" "We will find her. You must come now. The stairs are beginning to burn. Hurry." Esperanza held the towel over her face and looked down the stairs. Curtains flamed up the walls. The house was enveloped in a fog that thickened toward the ceiling. Mama and Esperanza crouched down the stairs where Alfonso was waiting to lead them out and through the kitchen. In the courtyard, the wooden gates were open. Near the stables, the vaqueros were releasing the horses from their corrals. Servants scurried everywhere. Where were they going? "Where's Abuelita? Abuelita!" cried Mama. Esperanza felt dizzy. Nothing seemed real. Was she still dreaming? Was this her own imagination gone wild? Miguel grabbed her. "Where's your mother and Abuelita?" Esperanza whimpered and looked around toward Mama. He left her, stopped at Mama, and then ran towards the house. The wind caught the sparks from the house and carried them to the stables. Esperanza stood in the middle of it all, watching the outline of her home silhouetted in flames against the night sky. Someone wrapped a blanket around her. Was she cold? She did not know. Sorry, I skipped something. She did not know. Miguel ran out of the burning house, carrying Abuelita in his arms. He laid her down, and Hortensia screamed. The back of his shirt was on fire. Alfonso tackled him, rolling him over and over on the ground until the fire was out. Miguel stood up slowly, took off the blackened shirt. He wasn't badly burned. Mama cradled Abuelita in her arms. "Mama," said Esperanza, "is she—" "No, she's alive, but weak, and her ankle, I don't think that she could walk," said Mama. Esperanza knelt down. "Abuelita, where were you?" Her grandmother held up the cloth bag with her crochet, and after some minutes of coughing, whispered, "We must have something to do while we wait." The fire's anger could not be contained. It spread to the grapes. The flames ran along the deliberate rows of vines like long curved fingers reaching for the horizon, lighting the night sky. Esperanza stood as if in a trance and watched El Rancho de las Rosas burn. I believe that the second question on your worksheet is actually going to ask you the third question is going to ask for an example of a simile. Remember that a simile is a comparison that uses the words like or as to compare two unlike things. So if you look on page 42, you're going to see a simile. I'm going to leave it up to you to find, but that's a hint that it's on page 42. All right, let's keep reading. Page 43. Mama, Abuelita, and Esperanza slept in the servants' cabins, but they really didn't sleep much, but they didn't cry either. They were numb, as if encased in a thick skin that nothing could penetrate. And there was no point in talking about how it happened. They all knew that the uncles had arranged the fire. At dawn, and still in her nightgown, Esperanza went out among the rubble. Avoiding the smoldering piles, she picked through the black wood, hoping to find something to salvage. She sat on an adobe block near what used to be the front door and looked over at Papa's rose garden. Flowerless stems were covered in soot. Dazed and hugging herself, Esperanza surveyed the surviving victims, the twisted forms of wrought iron chairs, unarmed cast iron skillets, and the mortars and pedestals from the kitchen that were made from lava rock and refused to burn. Then she saw the remains of the trunk that used to sit at the foot of her bed, the metal straps still intact. She stood up and hurried towards it, hoping for un milagro, a miracle. She looked closely, but all that remained were the black cinders. There was nothing left inside for someday. Esperanza saw her uncles approaching on horseback and ran to tell the others. Mama waited on the steps of the cabin with her arms crossed, looking like a fierce statue. Alfonso, Hortensia, and Miguel stood nearby. "Ramona," said Tio Marco, remaining on his horse. "Another sadness in so short a time. We are deeply sorry." "I have come to give you another chance," said Tio Luis. "If you reconsider my proposal, I will build a bigger, more beautiful house, and I will replant everything. Of course, if you prefer, I can live here with the servants as long as another tragedy does not happen in their homes as well. There is no main house or fields where they can work, so you see that many people's lives and jobs depend on you. And I'm sure you want the best for Esperanza. Do you not?" Okay, so think about the way that these uncles, and especially Tio Luis, is speaking to Mama and Esperanza. When we read The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle, we really took a close look of what manipulation is and how people can manipulate different situations by using flattery or by using fear or just manipulation of truth and switching around different details. So the character of Tio Luis, do you believe that he is trying to manipulate the situation? Do you believe that he is trying to manipulate Mama and potentially Esperanza? Maybe how would you describe this uncle? It doesn't give us a whole lot of details about him, but I want you in question 4, I believe, to describe the uncles to the best of your ability. If you need to take some creative license and kind of explain a little bit about what you think, go right ahead. But I want you to take an idea and look at that and think about the discussions that we had during the True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle when we were talking about Captain Jaggery to kind of help you with that question. We're on page 45. Mama did not speak for several moments. She looked around at the servants who had gathered. Now her face did not seem so fierce, and her eyes were damp. Esperanza wondered where the servants would go when Mama told Tio Luis no. Mama looked at Esperanza with eyes that said, "Forgive me." Then she dropped her head and stared at the ground. "I will consider your proposal," said Mama. Tio Luis smiled. "I'm delighted. I have no doubt that you will make the right decision, and I will be back in a few days for your answer." "Mama, no!" said Esperanza. She turned to Tio Luis and said, "I hate you." Tio Luis ignored her. "And Ramona, if Esperanza is to be my daughter, she must have better manners. In fact, today I will look into boarding schools where they can teach her to act like a lady." Then he turned his horse, dug his spurs into the animal, and rode away. Esperanza began to weep. She grabbed Mama's arm and said, Why did you tell him that?" But Mama was not listening to her. She was looking up as if consulting the angels. Finally she said, "Alfonso, Hortensia, we must talk with Abuelita. Esperanza and Miguel, come inside. You are old enough to hear the discussions." "But, Mama." Mama took Esperanza by the shoulders and faced her. "Mija, my daughter, do not worry. I know what I am doing." They all crowded into Hortensia and Alfonso's tiny bedroom where Abuelita was resting, her swollen ankle propped up on pillows. Esperanza sat on Abuelita's bed while Mama and the others stood. "Alfonso, what are my options?" said Mama. "If you don't intend to marry him, Senora, you cannot stay here. He would burn down the servants' quarters next, and there would be no income because there are no grapes. You would have to depend on the charity of others, and they would be afraid to help you. You could move to some other part of Mexico, but in poverty, Luis's influence is far-reaching." The room was quiet. Mama looked out the window and tapped her fingers on the wooden sill. Hortensia went to Mama's side and touched her arm. "You should know that we have decided to go to the United States. Alfonso's brother has been writing to us about the big farm in California where he works now. He can arrange jobs and a cabin for us, too. We are sending the letter tomorrow." Mama turned and looked at Abuelita. With no words spoken, Abuelita nodded. "What if Esperanza and I went with you to the United States?" said Mama. "Mama, we cannot leave Abuelita." Abuelita put her hand on Esperanza's. "I would come later, when I'm stronger." "But my friends and school, we can't just leave. And Papa, what would he think?" "What should we do, Esperanza? Do you think Papa would want me to marry Tio Luis and let him send you to school in another city?" Esperanza felt confused. Her uncle said that he would replace everything as it was, but she could not imagine Mama being married to anyone but Papa. She looked at Mama's face and saw sadness, worry, and pain. Mama would do anything for her, but if Mama married Tio Luis, she knew that everything would not really be as it was. Tio Luis would send her away, and she and Mama wouldn't even be together. "No," she whispered. "You are sure that you want to go with us?" said Hortensia. "I am sure," said Mama, her voice a little stronger. "But crossing the border is more difficult these days. You have to have your papers, but ours were lost in the fire, and they forbid anyone to enter without a visa." "I will arrange it," said Abuelita. "My sisters in the coven, they can discreetly get you duplicates." "No one could know about this, Senora," said Alfonso. "We would have to keep it a secret if you come. This will be a great insult to Luis. If he finds out, he will prevent you from leaving the territory." A tiny smile appeared on Mama's tired face. "Yes, it would be a great insult to him, wouldn't it?" "In California there is only field work," said Miguel. "I am stronger than you think," said Mama. "We will help each other." Hortensia put her arms around Mama. Abuelita squeezed Esperanza's hand. "Do not be afraid to start over. When I was your age, I left Spain with my mother, father, and sisters. A Mexican official had offered my father a job there in Mexico, so we came. We had to take several ships, and the journey lasted months. When we arrived, nothing was as promised. There were many hard times, but life was also exciting, and we had each other. Esperanza, do you remember the story of the phoenix, the lovely young bird that is reborn from its own ashes? Esperanza nodded. Abuelita had read it to her many times from a book of myths. We are like the phoenix, said Abuelita, rising again with a new life ahead of us. When she realized she was crying, Esperanza wiped her eyes with a shawl. Yes, she thought, they could have a home in California. A beautiful home. Alfonso and Hortensia and Miguel could take care of them, and they'd be rid of the uncles, and Abuelita would join them as soon as she was well. Still sniffling and caught up in their affection and strength, Esperanza said, and I can work too. They all looked at her, and for the first time since Papa died, everyone laughed. Now, take a second and think here. Why would everyone laugh at Esperanza for volunteering to work? Do you think that she had ever worked a day in her life before? And what does she think her life in the United States is going to be? They just said that her life in the United States was going to consist of hard work, and yet she has this idea in her mind that she's going to have this grand house, and that all these people are going to be their servants. She has no idea that they have just lost their entire fortune, and that they're going to be giving away everything to come to the United States for freedom. And so think about those ideas as you answer that question. I believe that is question 6. And question 5 on page 49 talks about Abuelita's determination that you should not be afraid to start over. And it's going to ask you your opinion on what exactly that means. So take a second if you'd like to stop and go ahead and answer those questions. Just push pause, and then you can join us back here in just a second. But we're not actually going to wait for you right now, so you can push pause, but we're going to keep going. All right, get comfortable. We are now starting at the bottom of page 50. And let me turn my camera. There we go. The next day, Abuelita's sisters came for her in a wagon. The nuns, dressed in their black and white habits, gently lifted Abuelita into the back. They pulled a blanket under her chin, and Esperanza went to her and held her hand. She remembered the night that Alfonso and Miguel brought Papa home in a wagon. How long ago was that? She knew it had only been a few weeks, but it seemed like many lifetimes ago. Esperanza tenderly hugged and kissed Abuelita. Mi nieta, we won't be able to communicate. The mail is unpredictable, and I'm sure that your uncles will be watching with my correspondence. But I will come. Of that you can be certain. While you are waiting, finish this for me. She handed Esperanza a bundle of crocheting. Look at the zigzag of the blanket. Mountains and valleys. Right now you are at the bottom of a valley, and your problems loom big around you. But soon you will be at the top of the mountain again. After you have lived many mountains and valleys, we will be together. Through her tears, Esperanza said, Please get well. Please come to us. I promise. And you promise to take care of Mama for me. Next, it was Mama's turn. Esperanza could not watch. She buried her head in Hortensia's shoulders until she heard the wagon pulling away. Then she went to Mama and put her arms around her. They watched the wagon disappear down the path until it was a speck in the distance, until even the dust was gone. That's when Esperanza noticed the old trunk with the leather straps that the nuns had left. What's in that trunk? She asked. Our papers to travel, and clothes from the poor box at the coven. The poor box? People donate them, said Mama, for others who cannot afford to buy their own. Mama, at a time like this, must we worry about some poor family who needs clothes? Esperanza, said Mama, we have little money, and Hortensia, Alfonso, and Miguel are no longer our servants. We are indebted to them for our finances and for our future. And that trunk of clothes for the poor? Esperanza, that is for us. Now, I'm sure that was quite the shock for Esperanza to go from this life of luxury and having everything that she wants and having beautiful clothing and clean clothing and people waiting on her hand and foot, to have this realization that she has lost everything, that she is no longer who she thought she was. What do you think that did to her identity? I mean, what would that do to you and your identity if your entire way of life was gone in just 1 second? It'd be really hard to adjust to. So if you look at question numbers 7 and 8, it's going to ask you about that. So if you want to take a stop, and even 9, I believe, you can actually look at that too. So anyway, take a stop if you'd like to, and if not, we're going to keep going. All right, here we go. Señor Rodriguez was the only person they could trust. He came after dark for secret meetings, always carrying a basket of figs for the grieving family to disguise his real reason for visiting. Esperanza fell asleep each night on a blanket on the floor, listening to the adults' hushed voices and mysterious plans. And smelling the plentiful piles of white figs she knew would never be eaten. At the end of the week, Esperanza was sitting on the small step to Hortensia and Alfonso's cabin when Tío Luis rode up. He remained on his horse and sent Alfonso to bring Mamma. In a few moments, Mamma walked towards them, drying her hands on her apron. She held her head high and looked beautiful, even dressed in the old clothes from the poor box. Luis, I have considered your proposal, and in the interest of the servants and Esperanza, I will marry you in due time. But you must begin replanting and rebuilding immediately, as the servants need their jobs. Esperanza was quiet and stared at the dirt, hiding the smirk on her face. Tío Luis could not contain his grin. He sat up straighter. I knew that you would come to your senses, Ramona. I will announce the engagement at once. Mamma nodded, almost bowing. One more thing, she said. We will need a wagon to visit Abuelita. She is in the convent at La Purísima. I must go see her every few weeks. I will send one over this afternoon, said Tío Luis, smiling. A new one. And those clothes, Ramona, they are not fitting for a woman of your stature, and Esperanza looks like a waif. I will send a dressmaker next week with new fabrics. In the nicest way possible, Esperanza looked up and said, Thank you, Tío Luis. I'm happy that you will be taking care of us. Yes, of course, he said, not even glancing at her. Esperanza smiled at him anyway, because she knew that she would never spend a night in the same house with him, and he would never be her stepfather. She almost wished that she would be able to see his face when he realized that they had escaped. He wouldn't be grinning like a proud rooster then. The night before the dressmaker was scheduled to come, Mamma woke Esperanza in the middle of the night, and they left with only what they could carry. Esperanza held a valise filled with clothes, a small package of tamales, and her doll from Papa. She and Mamma and Hortensia were wrapped in dark shawls to blend in with the night. They could not take a chance of walking on the roads, so Miguel and Alfonso led them through the grape rows, weaving across Papa's land toward the Rodriguez ranch. There was enough moonlight so that they could see the outlines of the twisted and charred trunks, the burnt-out vines rolling in parallel lines. Let me start that sentence over. The burnt-out vines rolling in parallel lines towards the mountains. It looked as if someone had taken a giant comb, dipped it in black paint, and gently swirled it across a huge canvas. Okay, now think about that sentence. Just that right there, that's really strong imagery. We have a really beautiful picture of what the night sky looks like. And we've all seen beautiful sunrises and beautiful sunsets. And sometimes we think, man, how could I ever put that into words? But that is one beautiful way to say it looks like someone had taken a gigantic comb, dipped it in black paint, and gently swirled it across a huge canvas. You have this beautiful idea, kind of a starry night type idea of what's going on. They reached the fig orchard that separated Papa's land from Señor Rodriguez's. Alfonso, Hortensia, and Miguel walked ahead, but Esperanza held back and pulled on Mamma's hand to keep her there for a moment. They turned to look at what used to be El Rancho de las Rosas in the distance. Sadness and anger tingled in Esperanza's stomach as she thought of all that she was leaving, her friends and her school, her life as it once was. Abuelita. And Papa, she felt as though she were leaving him too. As if reading her mind, Mamma said, Papa's heart will find us wherever we go. Then Mamma took a determined breath and headed towards the sprawling trees. Esperanza followed, but hesitated every few steps, looking back. She hated leaving, but how could she stay? With each stride, Papa's land became smaller and smaller. She hurried after Mamma, knowing that she might never come back to her home again, and her heart filled with venom for Tío Luis. When she turned around one last time, she could see nothing behind her but a trail of splattered figs she had resentfully smashed beneath her feet. All right, guys, I hope that you're enjoying this book. Like I said, take a second and go ahead and answer your questions for this chapter, and then go and watch the next video that I'm going to post that has the next chapter in it. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.